My son didn't ask why. He just went quiet on the phone, and I knew that meant he was already thinking about how to talk me out of it. I told him I wasn't asking permission. I was telling him what I was going to do. I'm 103 years old. 38 years I drove long haul. Midwest, mostly Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, sometimes down into Kentucky when the dispatch needed somebody and nobody else wanted the run. You spend that many years alone in a cab with nothing but flat road and a radio, you stop performing. For yourself, I mean. There's nobody out there to perform for. It's just you and whatever's actually true about the day. That's the only habit I brought into that building with me. My wife Dorothy passed 8 years ago. I stayed in the house, same house we bought in 1964, the one with the big elm out front that's been mostly dead for 3 years now, but I haven't taken it down yet. My son Gerald is 74, which still doesn't sound right to me. It still sounds like a number that belongs to someone else. He started using that careful tone about a year ago. The tone people use when they've been thinking about something for a while and they're waiting for you to come around to it on your own. Dad, have you thought about what comes next? Not a question. The way he said it, it wasn't a question. I told him I had thought about it. I told him I was going to go look for myself before anybody started deciding things on my behalf. He said, "Look at what?" I said, "At what it actually is. Not the brochure. The real thing." He didn't try to stop me. That's one thing about Gerald. He knows when I've already made up my mind. He got that from Dorothy, honestly. She was the one who taught him to read me. I packed light. My own wool blanket, I've slept under the same one since 1987, and I've never seen a reason to change that. A handheld radio I've had since the late 70s, the kind that picks up weather stations and AM signals, and sometimes, on a clear night, something coming from far enough away that you can't quite place where. A photograph of Dorothy from 1971. She's standing in the backyard, squinting into the sun, not quite smiling, the way she looked when she was about to say something she'd been holding on to for a while. I don't know what she was about to say in that photograph. I never asked. Now I can't. And the small carpenter's level that belonged to my father. 4 inches, brass casing, the glass tube gone slightly yellow with age. I don't use it for anything. It just lives on the windowsill beside my bed at home. My father carried it in his shirt pocket for 30 years. He did finish carpentry, trim work mostly, the kind of work where being off by a hair shows up eventually. When he died, I took the level and I've moved it to every bedroom I've slept in since 1971. I wasn't going to leave it behind to prove something about being flexible. The drive over took about 20 minutes. I drove myself. Gerald had offered twice to take me, and I told him twice that I was fine. He showed up at the house anyway that morning. Stood in the kitchen while I finished my coffee, didn't say much. I think he just wanted to see me leave under my own power, so he'd know I was still doing that. I appreciated it without telling him I appreciated it. That's probably a failing. The building was fine. I want to say that plainly and mean it. Clean floors, fresh paint in the hallways. Staff who moved fast but weren't rough about it. The woman who showed me to my room was maybe 30 years old, patient, explained everything twice without being condescending. The room had a window that faced a small courtyard, some kind of ornamental pear tree in the middle of it, a couple of benches nobody was sitting on. Bed was a little soft for my taste. One chair, one small dresser, a television mounted on the wall that I didn't turn on the entire time I was there. I unpacked. Put the level on the windowsill. Put Dorothy's photograph on the dresser. Push the chair a few inches to the left so it faced the window at a better angle. Sat down. Thought, well, here it is. Down the hall from me there was a woman named Esther, 89 years old, though she carried herself like someone who considered that number approximate. She'd been a bookkeeper for a construction company for 31 years, she told me this on the second day. Said it the way people say something they're proud of without wanting to seem like they're proud of it. Precise woman. Not cold, just precise. She always knew what day it was, what time lunch would be, who had borrowed whose sweater and hadn't returned it yet. She kept a small cactus on her windowsill, maybe 8 inches tall, the kind with the flat paddles. She'd had it 11 years, she said. It had moved with her from her house to her daughter's house to this room, and it had survived all 3 moves without complaint, which she seemed to respect about it. The third day I was there, I walked past her room and the windowsill was bare. I didn't say anything right then. That evening at dinner I sat near her, and after a while I asked about the cactus. She said an aide had moved it. Something about the windowsill being needed during morning medication rounds. A tray had to go there, apparently, and the cactus was in the way. She explained this the way you'd explain a minor traffic delay. Matter of fact, already filed away. I asked where the cactus was now. She said somewhere in the room, she thought. On the floor, near the dresser, maybe. She hadn't moved it back. I asked why not. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, I suppose I didn't want to make it a thing. I've been turning that over ever since. 11 years she'd had that plant. It had survived 3 moves, and now it was on the floor near the dresser because she didn't want to make it a thing. That's not weakness. I want to be clear about that. Esther was not a weak woman. She was sharp and she was patient, and she had clearly spent her life being the kind of person who knew how to pick her battles. But something in that place had already taught her that this was not a battle worth picking. And she'd only been there 7 months. I want to say something here, and then I'll keep going. If this is reaching you, if you're sitting with this right now, I'm glad you stayed. Come back next week. That's all I'm asking. Just come back. The mornings were the hardest part to describe. I wake up at 5 o'clock. Have since the 70s. Driving will do that to you. The body just sets itself and doesn't ask permission to change. At home, I go out to the back porch. Doesn't matter what the weather is doing. I stand there with coffee, and I look at whatever there is to look at. Some mornings it's just the yard, the elm, the particular color the sky is. Some mornings a deer comes through. Either way, it's the first thing I do, and I'm the one who decides to do it. In that room at 5 in the morning, there was nowhere to go. The hallways had overnight staff, but you weren't supposed to wander. The courtyard wasn't accessible before 7. I could sit in the chair by the window and look at the ornamental pear tree in the dark, which I did. But it wasn't the same thing. At home, standing on the porch is a choice I make. In that room, sitting in the chair was just what was left after everything else was unavailable. I noticed the difference immediately. I kept noticing it every morning. By the 4th morning, I stopped trying to pretend it was the same. There was a man named Roy who ate breakfast at the same table as me most mornings. Quiet man. Had worked in a warehouse outside Dayton for years, he said. Inventory management, knowing where everything was. He had big hands and he moved them carefully, the way people do when they've spent a long time handling things that mattered. Every morning, Roy asked for his oatmeal without brown sugar. He didn't make a big thing of it. He just mentioned it, the same way you'd mention anything, a small preference, the kind of thing that takes 2 seconds to accommodate. Every morning, the oatmeal came with brown sugar. First day, Roy mentioned it again when the bowl arrived. The aide nodded, apologized, said she'd make a note. Second day, same thing, Roy mentioned it. Aide apologized, said she'd pass it along. Third day, Roy looked at the bowl for a moment when it arrived. Then he picked up the spoon and started eating. He didn't mention the sugar. I watched him decide that. I couldn't tell if he'd made a conscious decision or if it had just happened the way things happen when you stop expecting them to change. I didn't ask. It wasn't my business. But I kept thinking about it for the rest of the day, about how small that was, about how it would look like nothing to anyone watching from the outside, a man eating oatmeal with brown sugar. So what? The thing I kept seeing wasn't cruelty. That's what I need to explain, because if you haven't seen it yourself, it's easy to think I'm describing a bad place. I'm not. It wasn't a bad place. The people who worked there were doing something genuinely hard with not enough time and not enough hands, and most of them were doing it with real care. What I was watching was smaller than cruelty, quieter. It was the gap between what a person said they wanted and what actually happened, and then the smaller gap, later, when the person stopped saying what they wanted because they'd already learned the size of the first gap. Esther stopped correcting the aide, who kept calling her Estelle. First day she said, "It's Esther," firmly, not unkindly. Second day she said it again, quieter. Third day she let it go. I watched that happen across 3 days, and I couldn't have told you the exact moment it changed, which is probably the point. A woman down the hall always sat in a particular chair in the common room. Good light, she'd said. She liked to read in good light. One afternoon, someone else was in it. She stood in the doorway for a moment, looked at the chair, then went and sat somewhere else. Didn't say anything, just adjusted, little by little. That's all it was. Nobody dramatic, nobody suffering, obviously. Just people making 1,000 small adjustments until the adjustments became the shape of the day. And after a while, you stop noticing you're adjusting because adjusting is all there is. I want to be careful here because I don't want to sound like I have it figured out. I'm 103 years old, and most of what I know is how much I don't know. But I'll say this. By the 5th morning, I noticed I'd stopped thinking about what I'd do when I got home. Not planning, not looking forward to anything specific, just stopped. I was waking up and waiting for the morning to arrive and hand me the day. That's not how I live. That's not how I've ever lived. Even on the worst runs, even in a truck stop in the middle of nowhere at 2 in the morning waiting for a weather system to pass, I was always pointed at something, always thinking about the next thing I'd decide. In that room I was just waiting, and I'd only been there 5 days. Last morning I found Esther in the common room earlier than usual, before breakfast. She was sitting with her hands in her lap, looking at the courtyard window. Just sitting. I sat down nearby. We didn't talk for a while, which was fine. Esther was comfortable with quiet. You could tell she'd spent time with it. After a while, she said, "You're leaving today." I said, "Yes." She said, "Good." Just that. The way you'd say it about weather that was finally going to break. I don't know why, but I asked her if there was anything she wanted me to tell anyone on the outside. It came out before I thought about it. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "Tell them it goes faster than they think. The adjusting. Tell them that's what nobody prepares you for." She said it plain. Not bitter, not looking for sympathy, just accurate the way she said most things. I told her I'd remember that. She nodded and looked back at the courtyard. Gerald was in the parking lot when I came out. He'd driven over without calling ahead, which I expected. He took my bag. We didn't talk much on the way home. When we pulled into the driveway, I got out, went in the back door, put the kettle on, stood at the kitchen window looking at the yard. The elm was dropping another branch. I could see it from where I stood, hanging at a bad angle off the main trunk. I'd have to deal with that. Gerald came in behind me, set my bag down. He asked if I'd made any decisions. I said not yet. That wasn't entirely true. I'd made one, the one that mattered. I just wasn't ready to talk about it with him yet. He's a worrier by nature. He got that from me. Actually, though I've never admitted it to him, and I needed to sit with it myself first before it became a conversation. I was staying. That was the decision. Not because it was the safest thing, not because nothing could go wrong here. Things can go wrong anywhere. I was staying because this was still mine. The porch at 5 in the morning. The elm I haven't taken down yet. The particular quiet of a house where you know where everything is and everything is where you put it. I was staying because I wasn't ready to become someone who waits. If this reached you today, pass it to someone. Not to worry them, just so they know someone said it out loud. Next morning I woke up at 5, went out to the back porch. Cold, the kind of cold that feels clean, gets into your collar before you finish the first sip. Stood there. Nothing happened. No deer. The elm just stood there being mostly dead. The sky did what skies do. I stood there until the light changed, the way I always do. Then I went inside, put the kettle on, took the brass level off the windowsill and looked at it for a moment, the bubble sitting perfectly centered, the way it always does, the way my father showed me it should, and put it back down. Went and got my coffee, sat at the kitchen table, listened to the house.